All right, DJ LeRoy, how are you?
NightWatchman, how you doing, buddy?
Welcome back. Coming back from a Thanksgiving Day weekend.
So do tell, you have more leftovers or what?
Still got a few. I mean, when we had two people come to our gathering, and we had food for more than two people, so that was a good thing. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. As
Likewise.
did you. I
Yes, I
saw
did.
your Thanksgiving video card, which is lovely.
Thank you, thank you.
Hallmark was mad; they didn't have any part of it.
I shall make sure that I let the missus know.
hmm
Let's just say she outdid herself. She was
hmm
incredible,
hmm
incredible. So
we knew it was her, not you.
uh, she will tell you, Night Watchman, that I did contribute to the feast, the
Okay,
overall
okay, yeah,
ambiance and
right,
atmosphere. Okay.
right, okay.
Wow.
Chief napkin folder, yes.
Hey, you know what? Forget this, ladies and gentlemen. We're gonna have a great show this evening
hmm
because we're gonna continue to talk about because I'm fascinated about, of course, the school system in New York City and nationwide,
hmm
but specifically having grown up in New York about the specialized high schools.
hmm
So as you do know, Night Watchman, I did
hmm
attend one of those
hmm
specialized high schools that actually your
hmm
father attended as well.
That's
You know,
right,
you know.
Stuyvesant. Yep.
Exactly. Now, these gentlemen that I'm going to bring up all attended. Now, Night Watchman, what's
Yeah,
going on
I
there?
know. I
Is this
forgot to
the?
mention turn off your cell phone.
Lord,
I'm busted.
yes, yes, you are
But not
indeed.
only that, so I have a Google Voice line that also comes to my iPad. So I had to turn off two different things. So
I hear you,
don't
man.
do as I said. Do as I
Yes, yes.
say.
Do not see for the guys who I'm going to bring out before we actually went live. Whether you telling them all these things about me, so I'm going to let them know. Okay, it's you. It's
Okay.
always you.
Yes. Yes.
So,
Yes. Yeah.
so you know what? Let's get this thing popping, as they say.
Okay. So who do you have joining us today?
Well, you know what? I'm going to bring out the first person who did not attend Stuyvesant High School, but instead attended Bronx High School of Science.
Mm-hmm.
And that gentleman is none other than Mr. Jason Clark. Bring him out. Jason!
Hey,
Hey,
Jason.
what's up, Curtis? Hey,
All
Bob.
right,
Nice
all
to see you
right,
guys.
Mm-hmm.
Hear
all
you
right.
guys talking smack on the
Yeah,
air, huh?
you know, every week I go through this, man. You know, it's
Yeah,
crazy,
it's
but
our First Amendment right. Talk
exactly.
smack.
Talk smack, exactly. Now, next gentleman I'll bring up did attend Stuyvesant High School, and you know what? I didn't even know that other than the Cuomos, in terms of Jamaica, guys who actually grew up there and attended Stuyvesant. But hey, Nat Needle, bring him out.
Hey,
Nat,
Nat, how are you?
I
what's
am
up,
out,
what's up, buddy? How you doing, man?
doing very well. I'm teaching piano lessons completely online. It's a completely different experience. And if you told me in early March I'd be doing that, I said, no, can't do that. Can't be done.
Wow, wow.
Can't be
And I
done.
do know, at least, Nat, I'm giving you the major props because you're keeping it real. You said Jamaica Queens and not Jamaica Estates. So, yes, go ahead, buddy. There you
Where's
go.
Jamaica State?
That's actually where the Cuomo, where the governor did grow up,
Well,
Jamaica
And
Estates.
that's also where 45's family had property.
Oh,
Mhm.
thank you for
Yes,
that,
yes,
Night Watchman.
yes,
Very good.
yes.
you know,
Well,
Hollywood, it's all
yes, exactly.
yeah.
Well,
Edge,
let's,
edge neighborhood in my time.
okay. Well, I want
Square.
to. I want to bring out another Stuyvesantonian, a
Mhm.
guy, Nat, who you know, and that's also a guy who he says he remembers me face to face, but why, as we get to this age, Nat, I can't remember much. You notice, and that, of course, is my man Alex Kent.
Hey,
What's up, Alex?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you doing?
Good, man. And you know what? I want to say this. I'm going to say this right in front of Night Watchman. That I usually have like a weekly call with Alex, And I enjoy that more than talking to you, Night Watchman, okay? Just so you know.
Ooh.
Yes.
Yeah, I know. I'm
Yeah.
abusive.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And not to be outdone, got to bring this man out because he actually did view our podcast when we had the class of 74 of Stuyvesant on.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Danny Chen. Danny.
All right.
Hi,
What's
everyone.
up, buddy?
How you doing?
Good, man. Good. How's everybody doing?
I'm good.
All right. All right. So you know what? I want to get this kind of popping in terms of I want you guys to give a brief overview of what you've been doing since you left Stuyvesant. Hey, let's start with you, Danny. I'll get to you. Jason. I promise. But go ahead, Danny. Go ahead, man.
All right, so 45 years, right? From Stuyvesant, went to Columbia, studied physics, computer science, then went to grad school at Cal Berkeley, computer science, and been doing computer stuff since. I'm a software engineer right now.
Excellent, excellent. Now, Night Watchman, I don't want to say that I have Danny on here because, it's all about connections. And my son, right? In terms of, getting a job afterwards, bam, Danny's the man. He's the man. That's all I'll say. So,
Okay.
and Lord knows, because I've also seen your accommodations there in your home, Night Watchman. So you definitely will want Alex to do a little something for you. But he'll tell you all about that. Alex, what have you been doing since Stuyvesant?
Well, I went to Rutgers from Stuyvesant and did some graduate work at your alma mater, Columbia, but briefly, and kind of wandered around for a while and ended up going to Japan, of all places, and became a Japanese translator and interpreter. That's been my gig pretty much for the past 30 years.
Nice.
With some sidetracks into Japanese public television, show production, documentaries, things like that. Got to see a lot of the country, Canada, and other parts of the world, and that was great. But with this coronavirus thing, man, I've had to fall back on another talent I have. I'm pretty good with woodworking and carpentry. So, Night Watchman, if you need some work done in your home,
Good to know.
I'm happy to oblige.
Great.
Good one, Alex. Good one, man. So Nat, besides teaching me how to tickle the ivories, do tell. What have you been doing since Stuyvesant, man?
Well, I got into theater at Wesleyan. Because of my Stuyvesant experience.
Well, my wife is going to love you because Nat, that's her alma mater. So wow, she will love you. Go ahead.
Wonderful. I'm glad to hear it. And then I also started working with kids every summer that I was at Stuyvesant, and with New York City kids. And then I just got into both kids and music, and that's kind of been it for me, either education or playing jazz.
Wow.
And songwriting like that. And that's been pretty much my life. And just, staying involved with my community. I've been living in Worcester for 20 years. This is where we came to raise our kids. But I got divorced some years ago, and then I've just stayed in Worcester and just, enjoying my roots in this community.
Beautiful,
beautiful. As rooted as the 20 years can make you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, man. And so, you know what, guys? We're even going to go to that dude from Bronx High School of Science. Jason, do tell.
How you doing, Kurt? So,
good, man.
So I guess what I've done since Bronx Science. So, for me, actually going to Bronx Science was a really a seminal point in my life. I think it's really where I kind of learned what it is I wanted to do with my life. My senior year was the year where Amadou Diallo was shot. And for those who aren't familiar, Amadou Diallo was someone who was shot 41 times by 4 plainclothes police officers when he was reaching for his wallet. And that happened my senior year, about 20 minutes away from where our high school was. And, at that time I was, very active, I guess, in student government. And we hosted a civil, student protest and civil demonstration. And while I was doing my research about that, I realized that The only office, and again, this is back in 1999, the only office out there that had actually done any research on stop and frisk was an office known as the New York State Attorney General's office. So after I graduated from Bronx Science and went to Princeton, I worked hard. I was able to attend University of Michigan Law School. But I always knew that I really wanted to start my career at the New York State Attorney General's office for those reasons, because I felt like this was a place where you could be able to make a difference in your community. So I did that for about 9 years. In the meantime, while I was doing that, I served as president of the Metropolitan Black Bar Association, where we also fought for a number of criminal justice issues, such as repealing Civil Rights Law 50A, which, for those of you who aren't familiar, is the law that shielded police records when they had substantiated claims of excessive use of force, for example, and people just wouldn't know. People would always be surprised, like how, like all of a sudden there's some force incident and that officer had substantiated claims of this happening multiple times before, and people are saying, how do you not even know about this? Well, it's because you couldn't actually see these records anymore. So those are some of the things I've been doing. I also started a program called Dream Chasers, which helps kids from low income and underrepresented backgrounds get into specialized high schools.
Hold on to that, because
Yeah.
I'm going to circle back to that, because that's going to be the genesis of a lot of this stuff.
So,
Watchman,
Jason, basically, you haven't been doing anything since you graduated.
Yeah, well, over at Bronx Science, we try to make sure we don't sleep on our laurels. So, we try to get out there and do what we can. So yeah.
So, gentlemen, you see how Bronx High School of Science rolls, okay? So, having said that, both Bronx High School of Science and Stuyvesant are maybe lacking in one key area, and that is diversity. And so that is one of the things that we're going to discuss this evening. So I want to know now, is that an issue? Is diversity in certain schools an issue that should be attacked? Or should we just let it play out? Should we maybe create other Stuyvesants elsewhere? Do tell. Weigh in on this, please, gentlemen. Alex, go ahead.
I think that the lack of diversity in the specialized high schools is a scandal. I think it should offend everyone's sense of what's right. And one thing that drew me into this whole thing was that the realization that our class of 75, Danny Curtis, was the high watermark of diversity. Yeah. At Stuyvesant. I don't know how it was at Bronx Science. I haven't followed that, but the makeup of the school was far more reflective of the makeup of the city at that time than it has been at any time since, and it just gets worse and worse from year to year. And so that's what draws me into this struggle. And I'm very interested. I did not know about Dream Chasers, but that's something that I really want to look into and support any way I can.
Excellent. Danny.
Yeah, no. As Alex mentioned, the demographics today are so unreflective of the population, and something needs to be done about it, right? I do believe that there should be other specialized schools. It is an issue of expanding resources as well as providing paths in. But so they're not exclusive, I don't believe. But something has to be done to improve the demographics of the specialized schools.
Gotcha. Nat, do tell.
It's a public high school. It's a public high school that is an elite high school. The kids who go to that high school, by virtue of going to that high school, are supposed to have a leg up. Are people who are destined in some way have a big opportunity to become leaders, shapers, by virtue of the fact that they're going to be hanging out in the upper echelons. So you have a school where these people are going out into the world to be the elite with the sense of implicit sense of racial superiority that comes from being in a school where Black and Latinx, Black and brown kids are way underrepresented, so small, it's almost invisible. Those people are perpetuating racism in this society, inevitably. And this is a public school. So this is what New York City is saying. is our elite. So I say these people are going out and doing harm. And I think that's my feeling to this society. And if you have an admission system and the result of that is this, well, you got to do something, because the only way people are going to go out into the society designated as an elite and manifest anything good is to be a group that has an intimate experience, intimate, powerful, adolescent, transracial, equal, equitable experience. Without that, what are these people going out thinking? That's bothers me.
Gotcha.
Public school now. Well, if you want to start up a private school like that, I guess I can't stop you. This is bad.
Correct. Okay. Jason, at Science, did you notice, let's say, the lack of diversity, or when did you graduate, by the way?
In 2000.
Oh, sheesh. Okay, so yeah, definitely there was, I guess, a lack of diversity at that particular time at Science as well.
Yeah, the funny thing was, when I was at Science, we certainly felt like there was a small number, but I did feel like we had at least like a cohort of us, right? Of Black and Latinx folks who were there. So, for example, if I didn't know the answer, I didn't feel like I was necessarily, people are looking at me and just saying, well, all Black people don't know the answer to a pre-calculus, or can do well in pre-calculus or what have you. Or when somebody did very well, it didn't seem like that was just, saying something about the entire folks who are there. And there was something good about that, because then you can just be a kid again, right? You could just kind of go through the general maturity things and not feel like that extra pressure. I mean, it was always there, certainly. But at the same time, again, I didn't feel, at least myself, like you had to speak or had to be representative of all folks who were there.
And now I went back to pressures, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I went back to my high school probably about 5 years ago as part of this project acceptance program that they have over at Bronx Science, where, alumni come back and they try to help seniors, with preparing and going through, prep, interviews for their college, when they're applying for colleges, right? And I remember going back there and not seeing any students. I mean, I'm sure, if we really looked around, there was like one or two, but there were no students that I could find who were Black there while I was there.
Wow.
And that's when it really hit me. Like, I knew the numbers had gotten bad, but I didn't realize it was that bad until I walked through, and all of a sudden I felt like I was a unicorn there, and not because of anything, just because I was the only, me and the other students from my class would come back, we were the only ones of color there. And, just to put this a little bit in perspective, so in New York City, 66% of all public school students are Black and Latinx. Yet less than 11% get into any of these specialized high schools. And then when you start to look at it for schools like Bronx Science and in Stuyvesant, I mean, the numbers are startling. There are 760 students that were accepted into Stuyvesant in 2020. Only 10 of them were Black. And that was 2 more than they had the year before, right? So, there is clearly an issue here. It's clearly something where there's a disparate impact. And just one thing, I know I'm taking a little bit of time, but as we were talking about this, something that came to mind. So just so folks don't make it seem like I'm just rallying on Stuyvesant or anything. I wanted to say a quote from my old principal when it talked about diversity and these issues. And this is back in 2014. So my old principal, he gave testimony to New York City Council, and he said, "We are all dismayed by the lack of diversity in the specialized high school. A diversity that does not match the ethnic and racial makeup of this city. But is the goal of the specialized high schools to reflect the ethnic and racial makeup of the city? Or is the goal to prepare the most talented and gifted students in our great city for positions of leadership in this challenging world that I live in?" And for me, my answer to that is it can be both. You know what I mean? I mean, if you give everyone the same type of resources, everyone can go out there and do well. I mean, just one of my colleagues at Bronx Science, who was my year, is Jamal Bailey. And because he was at Bronx Science, the things that he learned there, now he's a state senator. And now he's not only a state senator, he just became the Bronx County leader. So it's not that folks can't do it, but if there is a disparate and inequitable amount of resources where certain folks can't be able to prepare the way other students can, that's where you're going to see these things. And I think that, again, you know, it's not just about having the best and the brightest, but you can have the best and the brightest, and that can be reflective of everybody in this great city.
Gotcha. Well, now, gentlemen, you've all heard some folks say that exam, just get rid of that damn exam. Is that the way? Or is there something else that can be done besides the exam? Now, you heard this, Alex, when you were listening to the 74 guys. Remember they talked about also a summer immersion program, which is no longer happening. You heard that too, Danny. So is that the way? What is an answer that you can give me? Danny?
So I think, I personally think that some exam is needed. I have, you know, my own kind of preference, you know, the for objective measures for admission. Getting rid of objective measures or inserting subjective measures opens up the admission process to politics, which I don't think is right in this. So whether the specific exam, I have no tie to any exam, right? But it should be some type of exam. It should be some type of objective measure for getting in. Now, you can possibly, you know, quantify and objectify other things besides math and English, right? But you know, we should keep it as objective as possible.
Gotcha. Well, you know what? I'm going to quote the great Alex Kent, class of 75, who said that the one thing that the particular entrance exam does really, really gauge is how well you can take that damn exam. So is that it, Alex?
To tell you the truth, that was my experience. It was a really good measure of how well I prepared for the test. I was fortunate, or otherwise, I don't know. My father was an educator, and he worked in New York City schools. At the time, he was an assistant principal. That's how he knew about Stuyvesant. He told me about it, and he went out and he bought that ARCO test prep book, and he said, "Crack that damn book, and you beat this test." And that's how I did it. I don't remember a damn thing on the test except that I was sweating bullets. You know, Danny, I agree with you. I think some sort of objective measure is needed. What I just don't understand is how 45, 50 years ago in the city of New York, the specialized high schools managed to achieve a far higher level of diversity and, you know, demographic representation than they do now. I know that there have been changes in immigration in New York, a far larger, you know, a tremendous increase in Asian immigrants into the city with a different culture and a different approach, perhaps, to taking exams. I'm aware of all those things, but there was some system in place, as we all know, in the late 60s and in the 70s that kind of leveled the playing field a lot better than it does now. I don't know why that can't be brought back. I would like to see a system where you know, there are special affordances made for underrepresented groups in the city, underrepresented kids in the specialized high schools, and to see a system where these kids get support. And at the same time, I'd like to see education improved across the entire city, and, you know, at the you know, preschool, primary, and junior high school levels, so that kids from all backgrounds have an equal shot at succeeding at whatever measure it is used to get kids into, you know, to select kids for the specialized high schools. That's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see the clock turn back in a lot of ways, frankly.
I would say that back when we took the exam, it was a lot less competitive, right? I think from what I remember, there was not the focus that there is today into getting into you know, specialized school. I kind of remember, and it could be a false memory, But I kind of remember in junior high school. So I went through the grade school program. In grade school we had this IGC program, right?
Yes,
so
absolutely.
IGC
And
then it went
SPs.
to SP,
Mhm,
right,
mhm.
and stuff. So there was a track for for excelling in school, I guess,
That's
right?
right. A pipeline. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, but there wasn't this focus that said, okay, you're going to get into doing this, you're going to get into this school or that school. I kind of remember, and again, it could be a false memory. It's a long time ago. I kind of remember being told like a month before the exam that the exam was happening, and that if you want to take it, you sign up. I could be wrong,
Right.
but it wasn't like today, right? Today, it seems like from day one in grade school, you got to commit to getting into the specialized school, which is,
Yep.
again, too competitive.
You know when the exam is going to happen. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Nat, do tell. I mean, you heard in terms
Well,
of.
just,
Go ahead.
just I don't know. I'm just going to bounce off quickly off what Danny said, which is that what I'm picking up in the media is just like there's more desperation now, in the point of if I don't get my kid out of my neighborhood school,
Mm-hmm.
at that point, I can't have confidence that they're going to, make it out of there, being the person I want them to be. And I think that kind of fear driving, not just I want to get into Stuyvesant because that's who I am. I am this intellectual, bright, creative person. With this other pressure, I got to get into Stuyvesant because otherwise I'm going to go to X school or Y school, and I don't feel safe there, let alone I'm going to get a good education there. I don't feel a guarantee going to that high school that I'm going to get a good job. That's a little wild. That's a little severe, and maybe undercutting maybe the true purpose of these schools. With the assessment thing, I got to say, this is kind of my coming at it as an educator. I know that right in New York City, actually birthed in New York City, there are very powerful tools we call performance-based assessment that are not standardized. But operate at their highest potential in the same way my doctoral program at UMass Amherst did. And when I got my doctorate, I didn't take a standardized test. I had to be grilled by 3 of top people in their field. And that was, it was subjective. But heck, these were people who had gone through a very rigorous training, and they were the people to say whether I had done the same. And I'm not going to say because I didn't pass some universal doctoral test that I didn't have the same kind of assessment. And so, I mean, what if we treated our high school students the way we treated our doctoral candidates? That would be just something to think about. I just not making an argument. I'm just throwing that out there.
Okay.
I think people need to have the confidence that what they went through is not tampered by politics, is authentic. I don't even know if I use the word objective, but is you can see it, like when you see it. And I think that the only other thing I would say is that from the non-educator side, just the public citizen side, if we are putting out people who have in this society, in American society, we are sending out people into the world with a very skewed and bizarre sense of what are, depending on their racial makeup. We either have to redefine who's at that school, or we have to redefine what we mean by the best and the brightest. That's my opinion. I don't think you can be the best and the brightest in this society and be implicitly or unconsciously. I mean that in that sense. You have to have enough experience so this BS, and I'm gonna disrupt that in the space I'm in. And you need to have that. I think you need to have that intimate experience, not something you read in a book. That's all.
Gotcha.
That's what I got out of Stuyvesant. That's what changed my life.
Got you. Jason, so you heard the take here. So now, Dream Chasers, the program is literally, I guess, there to attack the test, the exam, to prepare the kids ready for the exam, because that's the reality that we've been dealt. Have you heard anything that makes you change that, or you say, hey, let's just get more Dream Chaser type programs around to go after those elite high schools?
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at this is, no matter what it is, that happens, whether there continues to be the exam, whether there isn't the exam, I think that what we need to do is make sure there's more diversity in these schools, right? So whether one does it, whether the other does it, to me, that's a step in something. Like, I actually don't care in a lot of ways. My thing is that there needs to be more diversity. So whether that's with the test, whether that is without the test, whatever, that's kind of my thinking at this point, what it is. But the way we have it right now can't be okay. I mean, just to put this a little bit in perspective. So like, before I do these things, I try to come with do a little bit of homework, right? And in 2018, right, there was a statistic showing that 1,274 of all the offers to go to a specialized high school came from the same 10 middle schools in the entire state. The same 10 middle schools, right? So a quarter of all the students who are getting accepted into these schools are coming from the same 10 middle schools. And you know what? Those 10 middle schools and those folks, they represent more than 4 times the admissions rate of all the students living in the city's 10 poorest districts combined. So you can't tell me that this is about, ability to do well or not. It's about the fact that we are failing our students and in our Black and brown communities. We are failing our students in our poorest districts, and we have to do better at these, in these ways. So whatever makes us get there is what I think we need to do. And I think that, yes, saying that we have to make our schools better is the starting point, because I think we all know that, but we have to have a plan as to how that happens, right? Like that needs to happen. That to me is the point that we really need to do something about. And yeah, as a quick segue, that's what made me think about, creating Dream Chasers. So at Dream Chasers, it's a free program. We try to provide free tutoring and mentoring to get kids into some of the top high schools in New York. And what we do is, we have students, we try to get them in like in, November, December of their 7th grade year. And we give them, we work with them on Fridays and Saturdays all the way until the time they have the exam. So by the time they actually take the exam, they've had at least 300 hours of preparation to make sure that they do well here, right? But in addition to that, we try to make sure we do things like take them to see some of these schools so they can kind of visualize, that they can see other students that look like them, who are at these schools, so they can recognize that this is something that's attainable for them. And we try to make sure we match them with mentors so that they see this, not just as, I know I got to study. I know I got to study. Everyone's told you that, like, through your, to that point in your life, but actually seeing how going to one of these schools or studying for this, can help you reach whatever dreams you have in the future. So that's one of the ways I've been certainly trying to tackle this. But I think that, that's a part of the solution. That isn't the solution in itself. We need to make sure that, we're really trying to aggressively tackle some of these inequities, because like I said, you can't tell me that it just so happens that the people that go to these middle schools, which is in the most affluent neighborhood, like in New York City, just happen to be smarter than anyone else. It's that folks are getting a certain type of training and preparation. Like the reason I got in, someone was just talking, I think it was Danny, about the IGC program. I was in, one of those IGC Magnum programs, and my class of about 35 kids, it's been a minute, but I would probably say at least 25 got into Bronx Science, and at least 15 got into Stuyvesant. And that's because, it's not as if we were just studying for the test, the month before, a couple months before, but we were getting an advanced curriculum and advanced teaching since 1st grade. So if you're at a point where you're doing well, and you're getting this preparation over a time, and all of us are doing it. It's not as if any of the kids here were just, had some innate ability that was better than others, but if you have that type of curriculum, you're going to do better. So that's my long-winded way of saying that, whatever it is, whether it's a test or not the test, we need to make sure that we focus on the point that in this school district, which is 66% Black and Latinx, that there need to be more kids here, and we need to do something actively intentional about changing that.
Gotcha. Right. So we hear that there needs to be this objective measure. How do we arrive at, let's say, an objective measure of, let's say, a test? Does that mean having input from, let's say, former alumnus, or should we leave it to the government bureaucrats? Let me hear your thoughts. Alex.
Well, Kurt, before I get into that question, I have a question, and it kind of comes from my own background. For the past 40 odd years, I've been involved with East Asia and specifically Japanese culture and society. And, it never escaped my notice that Japanese society is a very test-oriented society.
Yep.
They kind of cornered the market in high-stakes testing. It starts early and it goes all the way through college, and even there are even exams to get into good corporations. So, although I'm less familiar with Chinese culture and Chinese culture specifically in this country, Chinese American culture, I do know that Korean society, Chinese society, Japanese society place a really heavy emphasis on excelling in standardized tests. There are test preparation programs. There's just a general attention to test taking and succeeding at tests to get into school programs. This is a question. This is not this isn't a criticism. This isn't a judgment. I just wonder, the extent to which that has played in skewing the demographic in the specialized schools toward Asian kids. I mean, because it is, last time I checked, Stuyvesant High School was about 70% Asian. So, doing well in those tests is really important to the families, to the community. I don't really know what can be done about that. It seems to me that no matter what test was created, even if the test was subjective and, as Nat says, is kind of like, going up before your PhD committee and defending your dissertation, arguably with subjective criteria, it seems to me that people who attach a great deal of importance to succeeding at tests will figure out how to succeed at that particular test, whether it's producing a creative work, or a creative solution to a difficult problem, or an interview. It seems that that test-oriented people are going to find a way to do well at a test, no matter what that test is. And I really don't have an answer to that one.
Yeah, I'll even put it more crassly, is that when you have a standardized test, you can game the standardized test, right? It's gamification, right? And so you learn the rules of the test, you learn how to take the test, and as Alex said right off in the beginning, it's testing how well you do on the test, right? And that's kind of the thing that people, at least students, kind of go throughout, past high school as well, right? So that's always a problem. I had a Facebook conversation with somebody who wanted to get rid of the test, right? And he argued that the New York State standardized test, I think there's something like that, should be the replacement. And I didn't disagree. I think that, it's a standardized test, but I did warn that, one, to do some statistical analysis on how past test takers of that test would do on the entrance. But two, I did warn that once that becomes the test, it can be gamed, right? And that'll skew the results. So I think that, again, I kind of bemoan kind of the competitiveness of getting into these schools. I think that doesn't do anybody any good. It's there's something, about that. But unless everybody wants to get in the same, you want to game it, and you're going to devote the resources to gaming it. And that's, I think, contributed to the problem.
I think there's an issue with the resource allocation, because I think we're stuck with tests as a fact of life. And from when we went to school to now, testing has become much and much more dominant. But the other thing that's come up is all these resources to help you take tests, and there's a gap between who has the resources for those resources, because once there was only Stanley Kaplan, and then came Princeton Review, and then so you've got all of these test taking services and tutors, and a lot of times that's what makes the difference. And I would imagine that those 10 middle schools that Jason talked about, there's more emphasis on testing in those middle schools. So it certainly seems that addressing the testing ladder is got to be part of the scenario, and there's just not a way around it. But I'm curious as to how we also make sure that we look at what are the objectives in terms of teaching kids, especially teaching them critical thinking, because I think that the objective beyond, and there is something to be said for some of the basics of our education, understanding our system of government. I think this past election taught us so strongly that if we don't have an electorate that can think critically, we can be stuck with some really unpleasant choices in terms of governance. So there's something to be said in the testing apparatus to some of that set of skills, and certainly basic math, science skills, basic understanding of how our world works are something that needs to be part of the educational system. But I think as we get kids into high school, how do we focus on making sure that we're growing critical thinkers?
Anyone?
I went to. Can I jump in for a second?
Yeah, absolutely.
I went back to Stuyvesant at the end of 2019 and the beginning of this year to talk to the Japanese class there. And by the way, when I spoke to the AP Japanese class, I addressed them. I spoke to them in Japanese, and I was blown away because most of those kids understood what I was saying, which is really hard to do. But what struck me, I said to the Japanese teacher after the classes, I said, "These kids are brilliant. I'm just so amazed." And she said, no. A lot of these kids, and I saw it in the Q&A after each of the classes also. A real reluctance to take chances in asking questions, a real reluctance to show any kind of vulnerability or to expose themselves in any way, a reluctance to take any kind of risk. And, Bob, to your comment about the need for critical thinking skills, man, that's what education has got to be all about. And I think what the Japanese teacher was trying to tell me, it was clear, was that her students really struggle when it comes to critical thinking skills. So if we're saying that this so-called objective and rigorous test is measuring kids' ability to learn critical thinking skills, I think we're deceiving ourselves. In fact, it may be quite the opposite.
Wow.
Yeah. And if I could just jump in. So, one of the things I think about is, in law school, right? Yeah. One of the things that they really pride themselves on when you are in law school is teaching through something called the Socratic method, right? And what that means is it's about critical thinking, right? This goes exactly to that point where, the question isn't, an A or B or a multiple choice. It's like, what would you do in this situation? So, okay. Now that we have that, what if the situation changed just a little bit? What would be what are the possibilities there? And if you change this, how will this change the impact or what your options are available to you, right? So it's not about, to that point, just a standardized exam. It's about being able to look at something and realize that, different variables can shape what the actual, what issues may be there and what solutions are there, right? And I think that, that's something that you end up losing sometimes when the focus really is just on being able to do well on an exam, because what it is, it's a lot of, rote memorization or making sure you know formulas and doing it. And look, I mean, there's an importance to knowing how to do some of that stuff too. So I'm certainly not saying it's an either or, but we do need to make sure that we have these critical skills. And I guess even to take it a step back to, I think, where you are starting off with this, which is, what are some of the things that, we could be doing is, we just need to make sure that, there are more lanes for people to do well. Like here in Queens, there are only 2, gifted and talented programs, but there certainly isn't one where I am in Southeast Queens.
Wow.
There aren't any gifted and talented programs at all in the Bronx, right? And, we should have more specialized. I mean, that's something that you could just do now. But even with that, I start thinking and taking a step back and say, well, why do you even have to go to a specialized high school? Or, why do people want to go to a specialized high school? It's because maybe the school that they're going to, isn't going to be able to make sure that their kid can be able to do well or get into a good college or what have you. If you look at the New York State Constitution, it actually has a clause in there, an education clause, that every single New York City student is entitled to a sound and basic education. And there was this group that brought this lawsuit called the Campaign for Fiscal Equity. I think this is probably like back around like 2000. And they actually, the New York State Court of Appeals, which is the highest court in New York, actually found that, you're right. The school system here in New York, in New York State, is not complying with what the New York State Constitution is doing. But, the government just said, like, well, we don't have the resources for it, so there's nothing we can do about it. And that's the type of, philosophy that we can't allow to happen. And that's why, we start to see numbers like this, because the disparities that we see in specialized high schools, the disparities when it comes to folks of color getting into college, the disparities that we see in education, all in all, these are symptomatic of choices that were made earlier. And until we start changing the way we look at those things, making sure there's more critical thinking, making sure that we're not just saying education has to be better, but doing something intentional about it, we're going to keep having the same conversations here.
Jason, I've got a question for you. Going in a slightly different direction. All schools right now are now dealing with challenges as a result of the COVID pandemic. Do you know how have Bronx Science and Stuyvesant responded to the crisis?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to necessarily speak on their behalf, because I wouldn't necessarily know in that sense. But, what I've generally seen is that schools with the resources and kids who are at a point where they can kind of be able to, pivot a little bit, they're doing well. Right. I mean, they're doing well. What we're really seeing, and what I'm really worried about, is the fact that we're going to lose a whole generation of students, because since last March, they were getting remote learning. And a lot of these folks who were getting remote learning were not getting remote learning. Sometimes they were getting a video that they were watching. Sometimes you're finding out that, I think there was some statistic like in the beginning of the year that like over 70,000, and I could be wrong with that, but I'm pretty sure it was somewhere around 70,000 of students who didn't have access to broadband internet or a tablet or what have you, still didn't have that information. And this is just going to exacerbate the issues that we already have out there, right? So what we got to do, and on top of that, one of the things I know with Dream Chasers, we're having trouble with, one of the things we see with other programs is, figuring out a way to make sure that you're able to keep kids engaged. It's different when you're doing it remotely as opposed to having them right in front of you. But, to kind of, circle back to where you're going, my best guess would be is that kids who are already at that point, because you start off about, what can we do at high school? It's really in middle school, and it's actually not even really in middle school. It's really in elementary school, that if you have those skills and you have that, the muscle memory, and you can kind of, in the synapses are like hitting like why, this will work, then you're going to be in a better position to do better. And that's why I'm worried that a lot of students who, through no fault of their own, are going to be recycling this system of inequities that's just going to pervade for like another generation.
I would like to go back to the critical thinking kind of theme. I understand I understand the desire for that. I would say for myself, and my critical thinking probably came later in life.
Me too.
Again, it may be false memory. This is stuff. When you think back, you fill in the blanks and stuff, right? So I think that more than anything, I had curiosity. Growing up in the '60s, it was the space race and all the stuff that kind of came with it, right? Walter Cronkite's 2001, 21st Century, all that science stuff, right? So I had curiosity. I'm not sure I had the critical thinking, at that point. So that's one thing, right? It's a somewhat of the danger, I think, to project adult critical thinking to kids,
yeah.
or kids who are kind of on the verge of growing up. And high school is this cusp, right? I was a young kid when I got into high school. I was a young kid when I got into college, right? And so I'm a little worried that if we kind of just focusing on it's a desirable goal for sure. It has to be in the right context, and I still want to bring that back to objectivity. Okay, because again, growing up where I grew up, how many times are you judged on your critical thinking by an accent or how you say things, right?
Right.
And so if you put subjective to that, like in front of a doctoral, panel, right? And you're trying to explain things, but you have an accent, right? How does that affect things, right? So again, I don't want the high school. Again, I agree. I agree that the thing is to fix the demographics. That's the thing to fix, right? But I don't want the high school. I don't think the high school admissions should become like college admissions. The doctoral program, I didn't go through a doctoral program, so I don't know what it's what it's like. But the college admissions I find to be so opaque and random. And I find that so I would not desire for the high school admissions to mimic that.
Gotcha. So Nat, you heard a couple of things. You heard the critical thinking. You also heard, of course, remote learning. You mentioned early on before we started in terms of you've been doing remote teaching. What do you think about Jason when he mentioned the disparity in terms of the resources, broadband, and all those particular things? I'm assuming that none of your students have such an issue. Do tell.
Oh, they certainly have those issues. And sometimes I myself have had to provide in order to support and keep. I think that what I would say is that the shift to people but not about on a personal level what they felt they were losing by the face-to-face interaction. But by and large, the students who left me in the shift to remote were students who mostly were the students who were no longer that more at the point of making their own decisions and doing what their parents thought was good for them. I lost those kinds of students, and I wasn't, except for financially, I wasn't sorry to lose them. And then I lost older students because I teach into the seventh. I mean, my oldest student is 76 years old, who is just determined to teach him in his way, but his motivation's high. And so I lost older students who just couldn't deal with adapting to the technology. Just didn't want to speak that language. I had to adapt to the technology in order to survive. But that was how that was. I didn't think I could do it, but I did it. And I'm still doing it. But the big difference is, for example, we did an online recital, and so much work went into making sure everybody had the right audio. There was an equity in the audio.
Wow.
And I pumped my own money into making that happen because that meant a lot to me. It was more important to me to build that community and everybody have a good experience, not be shut out because their audio was not good and they just needed an external microphone, different kind of thing. It's a lot of work, but it was worth it because the thing blew people away. People didn't think they'd get that kind of community in a virtual setting. I bring it back to what we're talking about. I mean, I believe that we have all the knowledge in education, all the tools, all the know-how that we need, and that we have a system that is deliberately designed to produce inequity, to maintain inequity, and not budge off it. And we have all kinds of concepts, like our concept of objectivity and our concept of merit and lots of other things. And those things rule the roost. But we need to use our critical thinking skills to question some of those assumptions. I personally believe that almost every, well, pretty much every form of assessment that we use, children, should itself be educational for that child. The process of going through the assessment should make the person feel that they grew from the process. And without even having to get into specific, I just want to throw that out. So we don't treat children that way.
That's a great concept.
But I believe that, and I've experienced that. And that's better. I don't do anything. Say again? Sorry.
Oh, I just said that that's a great concept. That if everybody came from the exam feeling like they learned something, that there wouldn't be so much trepidation around the exams. That would actually be a part of the educational process.
Yeah. Oh, and then just the one thing
true, and also,
say.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Say that again. Who says
Oh
that?
yeah,
Was
I
that
was
you?
just going to say, just real quickly, the one thing I've really, kind of a, collateral consequence of our Dream Chasers program is like, so in our first year, we had 10 kids in our program. And of those 10 students, one got into Brooklyn Latin, one got into Bronx Science, and actually one of the 8 kids that got into Stuyvesant that year came from our program. But
Congrats.
Thank you. But what I didn't think about, which I thought would, as we've gone through it and has been really helpful and really surprising and very hopeful, is that some of the students who didn't, they also got into schools like Brooklyn, from Beacon High School. They got into
Good
other
school.
top schools, and they've gotten into, and they're also doing well because, in addition to that, because they were doing this additional preparation for this whole time, they also had to learn how to multitask, right? And when they were starting high school, they were in a better position to actually do well wherever it is they went to do so. So I guess to that point, that's the reason I was, trying to jump in there, is that, there are these other things that you can learn from this process, if you do the process, the right way.
That's true.
So we're in the wrap-up phase, DJ LeRoy.
Oh, I do see. Time always flies when you're having fun here. So.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Yes, it does. So, gentlemen, we're not going to solve this in a day or an evening, as we say, right? But do give me some, let's say, some last thoughts in terms of what your forward motion sees you doing. Jason.
Well, mine's going to be very a self-interested one, which is support programs like Dream Chasers. It doesn't even just have to be Dream Chasers. There's also a program called like Admission Squad. I know Brooklyn
who also went to Bronx High School of Science, by the way.
Right.
I know.
Yes,
But go ahead.
definitely. But I know, like for example, one of the ways we get our program is in the beginning, I would just try to go out there and reach out to everyone who would listen to me and ask if they would give me some money so that we could do this program. But then we had like a student celebration last year where we could do a fundraiser, but with COVID, we haven't been able to do that. And for us, the more money we come in, it just means more students that can help. So one thing that we could just do today, if folks are interested, just look up dreamchasersnyc.com, kind of support us so we can help, support some other students, but also, more gifted and talented programs, more specialized high schools. Yes, you have to change the actual law, to have, to change some of the things with Bronx Science, Stuyvesant, and
Brooklyn Tech.
Brooklyn Tech. But for all the others, those are city created programs. So the city and the city council members or whoever can do whatever they want right now. So when people try to make it seem like it's just one or the other, there are other options out there. So those are a few things that I think.
And before you go, Jason, so should you become a council member, just answer this. Will you be, let's say, chair of the education committee for the city council?
Yeah, so if that ever happened with me, I mean, I will definitely say that education is, important to me. Like, I know that all of the experiences I had is because of the education opportunities that my parents made sure I had. In fact, all of this, we're talking about IGC programs. The only reason I was in a Magna program is because the NAACP and Legal Defense Fund brought a lawsuit on my behalf after they didn't want to let me in because of my race, even though I hit all of the qualifications or what have you. But, people shouldn't have to have those. You shouldn't have to overcome those battles and have to bring a lawsuit just to get a quality education. So no matter whatever it is, in any capacity, I'm always going to be doing what I can to help education because of the role it had in helping me achieve my dreams to this point.
Beautiful. Nat, do tell, going forward.
In Massachusetts, groups that I'm in now, on getting police out of the schools, where they don't, they do more harm than good. At least every study that I've read by reputable sources, that's what's indicated. And it's just like one more insult to it's designed to kind of hobble where we have 86% white teachers. And that's just one issue, but it's the issue that groups in our community, Black, Indigenous, people of color groups in our community care a lot about. So just trying to get behind that time. It's what started off as a local conversation became a statewide conversation. Now it's a national.
Okay.
Conversation. Just don't think a day goes by where I don't think about what Cornel West said about justice is love made public. And when I think about that, I think, well, who are you going to love more than children? It should have like naturally in your gut. If you can't love children, what's wrong with you? And so if you don't want justice for them, if you can't make your love public in that way, what are you, breast and brightest or something? Or what's wrong with you? Stuyvesant changed me. I went in as some kind of nebbish, and I came out critical about. I mean, it was time it went, Vietnam demonstration, Kent State, all that. Well, a big part of it was I had Black and brown kids in my face who weren't so trained to think they had to make white people feel safe. So sometimes I didn't feel so safe, but not in a physical way, but just like, oh, you mean you don't see the world the way I thought everybody saw the world, which is like me. That was.
Gotcha.
That the disequilibrium. That's all I can say. It changed me. So I'm probably coming.
No, I definitely appreciate that perspective for sure. For sure. Alex.
Well, I want to support Jason's initiative, and I'd like to support Dream Chasers. Unfortunately, I'm not a rich guy, but if you'll have my help, Jason, I'd like to reach out to rich folks and get them to support your program. I'm not ashamed to ask people for money for a worthy cause, and that's a worthy cause.
Thank you.
I'd like to support your work in supporting Black and brown kids as they chase their dreams. So, I'll get on your website and I'll connect with you and I'll do what I can to help. That's something I want to do.
Beautiful.
Thanks, Alex. I really appreciate that.
Excellent.
Not afraid to ask for money.
and
obviously neither am I.
And that's right. I see you did your pitch, Jason. Very good. Danny, do tell.
Well, I'll just echo Alex's sentiments. I think Jason's Dream Chasers, is a great way to go. Again, we need more of them. If we can get to grade schools, even better, right? But after this, I'll reach out to Jason as well.
Wow.
All right.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, it's happening
me
right
too.
here.
In our
So what
first year, the Harlem Development Corporation
Coming in for
was
that.
one of the programs out there that assisted us in making sure we got off the ground.
Yeah.
All
And
right.
Wow.
so I just want to make sure that that is mentioned because, you know, it's not just doing programs like this, but Curtis in particular has been a real advocate out there for trying to make a change.
Thank
out there.
you.
So
Right.
that's worth
Thank you, guys.
mentioning.
Thank
Okay.
you. And also, guys, if you did not know, a night watchman, Bob Ponce, his father attended Stuyvesant.
Mm-hmm.
So
They
there
knew
you
that.
go.
We talked
Other-
about that before you
Oh,
got here.
okay. So being late again, I got it.
Exactly. So we're late in leaving. We got to turn out the lights and sweep the studio. Thank you all for coming. This has been a
Guys,
great panel. Really,
thank you.
some great insight.
Thank you. Thanks for the
And
opportunity.
you're listening to Soul Lounge Primetime on WHCR 90.3 FM. Also on our YouTube channel. Like, subscribe, and come back again next Monday.
The voice of Harlem.